If you had told me 5 years ago that I'd be standing on a stage at SFF touting how one of the most painful periods in my life might have ended up being the best thing that happened to me, I would have probably slapped you and then cried. 5 years ago, I was sitting in my office somewhere way up there in the top right, at about 2:30 one morning, absolutely terrified. I was paranoid, convinced someone was waiting for me 18 floors below so they could serve me notice, lock the doors, and revoke access to the CBD building I had gone into debt renovating, locking out some 1,000 people from some of the biggest companies in tech, government bodies, and SMEs, with only me to blame. That year had been a wild ride. I had secured a Series A offer for $30 million at $100 million post-money valuation from one of the biggest real estate developers in town. Cha-ching. All in the race to establish pole position in Singapore in the hopes of then becoming APAC's answer to the co-working craze that was exploding in other parts of the world. All of this on the heels of just one successful site that I had launched only 2 years prior. A beautiful 1920s biscuit factory that had been sitting empty in a quiet shop house neighborhood on the fringe of the CBD with a couple of local eateries and coffee shops, temples, associations, and clans well past their heyday. The last vestiges of a red light district still apparent, evident by the showers and ceilings in our first office. I bid to master lease the building. I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do with it, but I loved it, and I wanted to try my hand at building a brand, building a community around this architectural gem. I wanted to build a community celebrating the entrepreneurial spirit, somewhere I would want to work, that put the solopreneur on the same level as big corporations, all brought together with restaurants, events, and synergistic lifestyle elements. The goal was to build a profitable brand and operation, not a proof of concept to enter the co-working industry, which was still very nascent in Singapore. And being a simple real estate guy, I was a virgin to the tech lexicon of Series A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We opened our doors March 2015 after an extensive renovation. This unique site at Keong Siak immediately had its own eclectic vibe, community, and alignment with the neighborhood. Our neighbors were mom and pops and businesses that saw the value in what we were doing. We tried our best to fit in and support where we could, giving temple tours to our members and supporting the local community center during holidays. It was a hit. Operationally breaking even in 6 months, the energy was palpable, and it was fun. We had created a hub with 4 restaurants and a cafe below and a dynamic co-working community upstairs. It was naive of me to think that we could recreate this buzz in a vertical, glass-clad, high-rise building in the CBD. Even though these 2 sites were only a few minutes apart, they were eons away in terms of the sense of community, place, and purpose. But by this time, I was way too far gone. I was completely drunk on my own Kool-Aid. The co-working craze was approaching our shores. Investors and developers were circling, having severe FOMO of not getting a piece of this industry disruptor. Though it didn't help that I had never experienced failure in business, having had the market move in my favor and divesting successfully out of a couple of previous ventures, I was well aware that the industry was going through a paradigm shift that I would likely never see again. The valuation metrics were absolutely absurd. Number of LOIs signed, how aggressive one was in the number of seats they were going to open. But for some reason, I thought my plan was more nuanced. I thought I was more deserving. I thought I was capable and I should be the one given loads of money to secure this runner-up position. Hardly stopping to question if these projections may be severely challenged simply because my ask was heavily discounted compared to the poster boy in the industry. I had taken on 4 master leases, put down LOIs and deposits in the millions on a total of 200,000 square feet across 6 sites with a singular investor lined up for our Series A, only to have them no-show on the day of signing. After having dragged us through 6 months of due diligence while encouraging us to continue our spending our own money along the way. Soon after, we signed a measly settlement with our would-be investor after failing to find legal representation who wasn't conflicted in going against them. We would find out that they invested in a competitor at half the valuation and put them into one of the sites they had asked us to come into as a prerequisite to their investment. A nice look under the kimono for a few $100K. Little has been heard of this competitor ever since. In any case, it was too late. The 800-pound gorilla in the room had landed, and they landed with a bang. They opened directly across the road, nonetheless. I tried my best, I begged, I borrowed, but could not stave off the inevitable. Our CBD location was liquidated and eventually went to a publicly listed company that took over some of our fit-out and members, but still couldn't make it work in the end. I had to voluntarily liquidate all the sites that I had put deposits on. The financial fallout and the distraction of the liquidation process were excruciatingly painful. As an entrepreneur, it was impossible for me to separate and prevent it from permeating into every aspect of my life. I was spiraling, and every time I hit rock bottom, I found a new low. Corporate litigation matters escalated into personal ones. I think the only thing that kept me going was having to physically move back to our original neighborhood location. I had become so distracted with term sheets, valuations, putting dots on maps, and painting a tunnel vision picture of the future to fit someone else's investment thesis that I had forgotten that we still had a living, breathing business, a brand, a reputation. The support from our existing and new members was so encouraging, we were actually able to grow our original business, expanding it into a second major site across the road. I was starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel. It seemed like the market had evolved into one that could support niche, community-driven, differentiated operators like us, that we could potentially grow the original business organically while continuing to manage the fallout from the liquidation. Or so we thought. We had hardly come up for air when a global pandemic emerged. Companies were scrambling, employees were scared for their jobs, and there was a general state of panic across all sectors. People weren't allowed, nor did they even need to come into an office anymore. As exhausted as I was, somehow my crash course in failure had become my superpower. I had already failed bigger than I ever thought I could recover from. I somehow had received some sadistic training to prepare for this experience. One that could make or break the original business we had fought so hard to protect. While this period was so incredibly stressful, we somehow found ourselves potentially on the right side of a global pandemic, hopeful that the world might come to its senses and realize why our original business model makes so much more sense. Our properties are a lot more human scale, and we knew all our members almost personally. Importantly, I think we had empathy for founders and country managers that were trying to find a solution during this time. I had been there. I knew the feeling, and I knew the response. So we did the opposite of what we were supposed to, and what our competitors call the market norm. We preemptively offered rental relief much before we ever saw a dime from our landlords or from the government. We sought court protection from our institutional landlords so we could pass through this relief to our community. We offered companies opportunities to downsize. We remained open for critical FinTech companies to operate during lockdowns and realized that downsizing was only half the equation. A lot of our FinTech companies actually expanded in the later part of the pandemic. We prioritized our community and set out to find ways to support them and their businesses. We offered the most flexible terms on the market. And this time around, I was able to keep every team member employed. We emerged from COVID with 98% occupancy in our main building and have organically grown our operations from 2 to 33 beautiful conservation properties in and around the neighborhood. Now, when people ask me what I do for a living, I tell them I'm a neighborhood builder. It sounds abstract, but at the core, it's what I've really been doing these last 8 years in Singapore. I learned the painful and expensive way that no matter how well-intentioned our plans for brand building, sometimes we need to rescale, let go, get back to the essence of what works, the kernel of an idea, the experience, the feeling that resonated in the first place. While I was forced to give up our CBD location and hurry back to the neighborhood, tail between my legs, I saw on the daily how people interacted with our space, the community we had built, and the thriving local surroundings. Now, success has been redefined for me. It's getting to eat my favorite kaya toast on the same street that I work. It's knowing my members' names because I gave them their first tour. It's walking my neighborhood and seeing the businesses and shops that have survived. Some may say that my world dreams have shrunk to fit my experience or failure, but I would argue that it has expanded. Or maybe that's what growth is. I eventually found peace and a sense of home in the neighborhood that I was once itching to outgrow. I may not have a huge valuation or regional presence, but I have a local impact that I'm proud of and that is my own. I have a network of global companies that I can support with an offbeat oasis and lifestyle hub, a newfound resilience that I never knew I had. So, am I glad I went into liquidation? Hell no. Of course not. I don't wish that kind of stress upon anyone. But it forced me to call bullshit, including on myself. It forced me to align my business with my values, to stop putting meaningless dots on maps, and to grow one dot at a time. Outside of work, it forced me to confront what I needed in my life, which was balance and a life outside of work. So I did what any bachelor does when they need a life change. I adopted a puppy, and that puppy's brother was adopted by my now wife. And 2 weeks before our wedding, the liquidation matter ended. And now, so was it the best thing that happened? Absolutely.